You're listening to the 14th Source for all geeky and nerdy news and discussion, which means that you're listening to a podcast.
For all intents and purposes.
I am D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And we are your two overeducated codependent nerd hosts, bringing you the things that we like to talk about, but filtered through inquisitive and critical lenses in the episode for Friday, May 20th, 2022. And it is... I know it seems like we don't have anything to talk about if I talk about the weather, but... Sacramento's weird. Today, as of the day of this recording, Andrew, it hit 98 degrees. I'm like, no. That's for June, Sacramento. Get out of my May.
Whereas I walked out of the house this morning, or the apartment, and it was raining. Like,
great.
Solid raining at like 40-some degrees.
That's pretty rough. I feel real bad for you.
Oh, no. It's just that thing where... because they always joke about Seattle seasons, and we're in third winter, I think they call it.
Right. It's like, I mean, it is akin to California, especially coastal California seasons, right? Where it's all like, here's sun. It's the 60-degree season, it's the 70-degree season, and it's the 80-degree season. But yeah, so Sacramento is just kind of like, hey, what's up? I just want to let you know that summer's coming. I'm like, well, you could wait until summer's here.
Like, no.
But no.
No.
So I can't confirm nor deny whether pants are being worn right now. Is all I'm saying, dear listeners. So if that makes your listening experience better, you're welcome. If it makes it worse, I'm sorry.
I want to know who in the audience is like, ooh, that makes it worse and or better. Like, please comment on our our website. No, don't.
Hey, that's this week's poll. We haven't done polls in a while. Who do you enjoy listening to without pants on more? Andrew or Dan?
But yeah, so it's a week for timeliness and for seasons and talking about things that happened recently. So
sure.
Let's talk about something that happened recently, right?
Okay.
There's this new exciting movie that came out called Spider-Man. No Way Home? No Way Home. Sorry, they're all something home, right?
Are you trying to talk about the new Marvel? You must mean Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness.
Oh, well, obviously I don't, because that's in the theaters, so it means I have not seen it.
Oh, yes.
And although I admitted, a month ago that I had seen Spider-Man, you had not.
I had not.
Because you were limited by where it was available.
Indeed.
So, but I heard a rumor through my phone that gets text messages from you.
It was leaked.
It was leaked that you, in fact, saw this movie.
I did.
And it's a fun segue to discuss something interesting and fun. But let's start with the movie, right?
Right. Honestly, there's a lot of parallels. We could be honestly. I don't know if we're going to have a conversation about Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, but honestly, what we talk about here could apply there. There's a lot of overlap, so to speak. Considering, spoiler alert, and we should say this right up front, we're going to be talking about spoilers for this movie, but spoiler alert, the post credits, right? The post credit sequence of Spider-Man No Way Home, I was surprised to find, is just a trailer. Just a trailer for a movie that's not even made by that studio.
I want to say they did that for Captain America. Where the post credits was a trailer for the Avengers.
Which Avengers? Age of?
The first one.
Oh, maybe.
Right, the first Captain America was the movie that came out right before the Avengers. I know that the end of the movie ends with him waking up, but I'm pretty confident that that's actually the post credits for that movie was just a trailer for the Avengers.
We'll have to do some research there. We'll put our interns on it.
So, in full disclosure, Dan had actually texted that, wait, is this the first time when a post-credit sequence is just a trailer? And I'm like, I feel like it's been done before. And the more I think about it, I'm pretty confident that at the end of Captain America was just a trailer for the Avengers. So,
all right, we'll see.
If I'm wrong, I will face no consequences.
You'll have to do next week's episode.
In Congress.
Oh, damn. You'll have to. Or you could you'll have to do next week's episode with no pants on.
Given how cool it is in Seattle, that might be a challenge.
Well, that's the price you pay. And before it happens, apologies or you're welcome, dear listeners.
So the recent Spider-Man movie is now out on most home videos.
Indeed.
And it's probably not a bad thing to talk about it because it was kind of a big deal, right?
Yeah.
It was kind of the big Marvel-ish movie that came out in theaters, made, $6 quadrillion.
Yeah.
But also was kind of a big deal because it did this big callback not to other Marvel movies, although it did feature Benedict Cumberbatch as Dr. Stephen Strange, but it also, featured lots of people who'd been in previous Spider-Man movies. Right. Since, 2001? 2?
1 or 2, yeah, one of those, yeah.
So, right, featuring everyone from Willem Dafoe to Alfred Molina to Jamie Foxx to, just the whole, and of course, some other people, Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield.
Right. I was quiet because I was looking to see when it came out relative to Loki, another Marvel property I haven't watched. But yeah, Loki came out first because I was wondering if this is the MCU entry that introduced multiverse stuff, and it hadn't. But on the big screen, I guess right. Yes. I mean, technically, and Endgame, where they're like bouncing between different timelines, whatever. This is where they're calling it multiverse, and that kind of stuff.
Well, and even arguably Spider-Man Far From Home referenced the multiverse, except it wasn't real. It was a joke.
Indeed. Yeah, with Mysterio and everything like that, right? That was his premise. He was a superhero from another version of reality. And we're going to go into this more, but I have been a noted skeptic on multiverse stories. I am Multiverse Averse, if you will. And I'm really proud of that, and I'm going to write that down. Shut up. Because I think of that as being kind of a gimmick, or just fan service, and whenever I see multiverse stuff, I kind of like, okay, well, that's not for me, because, right? And so I stepped in this movie kind of skeptically, and I was really pleased with it. I should say I have also seen, it was on a whim, a coworker had an extra ticket to Doctor Strange, and he's like, "You available now?" I'm like, "Sure." And so popped in there with no planning, and I liked that movie mostly because it was a Sam Raimi movie. But that and watching this, I think my stance is softening a bit on multiverse stories, where I was very kind of angry about it, because I think both these movies, but this movie especially, since that's the focus for today, actually uses the multiverse in a very appealing and focused way. In that they're pulling in actors and characters from other, iterations of Spider-Man movies, but it is all working in service of the story for the MCU Peter Parker. And it's really good writing, I would say, generally speaking. But I might be getting ahead of ourselves, but I just wanted to kind of point that out. Like, I'm not going to come into this discussion and just shit on this movie, because actually I was kind of pleasantly surprised. And pleasantly surprised with sort of the more daring decisions it made. But we can get into that in a bit. I mentioned the multiverse. How does that play into this movie, Andrew? Can you, if you can remember, I guess.
Because I saw it, a month or two ago.
A month or two ago, yeah.
Well, so, right.
Basic premise for this film and how it uses the multiverse.
This is the movie where, for those that have seen the Spider-Man movies with Tom Holland, at the end of the previous movie, he's basically been outed as Spider-Man. Peter Parker has, right? By J. Jonah Jameson, who's basically...
InfoWars.
He's InfoWars, or Alex Jones or Tucker Carlson, I guess, at this point.
Well, yeah. I mean, if we're looking at like just online only kind of grassroots kind of thing,
specifically Alex Jones. So he's outed as Spider-Man, and in trying to feel like deal with the fact that I'm a high school kid who now everyone knows I'm Spider-Man.
Right.
What do I do? And of course, he knows the Sorcerer Supreme. Well, like you do when you've saved the world from Thanos. And he says, "Hey, Doctor Strange, do you know a way to fix this? Like to make it where I don't, like, this isn't a problem.
Right.
And of course, Doctor Strange, who's really like kind of shitty at being Sorcerer Supreme. Like, he's like, let's do dangerous shit, son.
Well,
like,
technically, he's no longer Sorcerer Supreme at the start of this movie.
Fair enough. But you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, let's do dangerous magic,
Right. Hey, kid, yeah. Sure, no problem.
Let's do something dangerous, and then I'll blame you when it goes wrong. But so they do some magic to try to fix it, and of course in that, and there's a lot that goes on there. I'm not placing blame on anyone,
right?
Other than Stephen Strange. But yeah, net result is the spell, whatever spell Peter Parker wanted, whatever spell Stephen Strange was trying to cast, what ends up happening is, looks like nothing happened. Oh, okay. And then, of course, things start to happen. What we discover is that this spell, this magic, has kind of torn open this multiverse. It has brought people in. Instead of making everyone forget that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, it brings people in from other places, other universes, dimensions, who know that Peter Parker is Spider-Man.
Right. And so, yeah, and so dealing with that problem. Ultimately.
Right, and of course, if you haven't already understood the joke, is that like the only people that know that Peter Parker is Spider-Man from other universes are literally the cast of every other movie, right. Minus the girls.
Yeah. We talked about this film briefly, because I hadn't seen it yet, when you had done the great Spider-Man rewatch of 2022.
Yeah.
And first watch, I should say. So let's just go on. Since you saw it first, what were your impressions of this film, especially in the context of the other Tom Holland movies and I guess the greater Avengers echelon, but also in the context of the other Spider-Man movies? Because you came away from the Sam Raimi films a little down. You're like, this Peter Parker is kind of a shit. And Willem Dafoe is kind of awesome. And then you're kind of, your Amazing Spider-Man series opinion was a bit middling. But this film, in the context of the MCU and, of course, the Spider-Man films, what did you think? What did you come away from this film? Because you did watch it in very close succession with all those other movies.
I actually, I thought this was... It's the kind of thing you don't do all the time. But I thought this was a real, it's a real banger, right? Like to bring back these characters from other movies with a completely it makes sense way, right? This makes sense. Bullshit magic gone awry, and I know it's just a setup to do this, but it made sense. And these people, these actors, don't show up just for cameos, right? It isn't just here's a scene with Alfred Molina flying by. Literally, some of these actors, we're doing the heavy lifting. Honestly, they're kind of the villains, right? Alfred Molina, lots of stuff. Willem Dafoe, holy shit, that man. Yeah. Well, always apparently he's I'll always come back and be the Green Goblin, right?
Honestly, going off of that point, I was really surprised at how integral these multiverse characters were to the story. Obviously the villains that were promoted in the trailers, but I kind of got the vibe that the other Spider-Man were gonna show up 10 minutes from the end and they were gonna high five and beat ass. But no, they like you're saying, they show up and they're part of the story, important parts of the story. Yeah, so really impressive and kind of bold considering how complicated that could be.
Right. And really a chance to give these characters, both villains and heroes, kind of a chance to come back and not necessarily fix things or address things or just have a closeout to the character. One that you could imagine if the Tobey Maguire series had gone on beyond 3 movies, they probably could have brought back Willem Dafoe and done something, or had the Andrew Garfield movies gone past two movies, they could have done, like, brought some of these characters back to say, hey, maybe this was not the best way to handle it, or to address the character that they dealt with. So it is, like, to bring them back in this context and to have them, serve as a functional character for, this new group of this new cast. And then to use that to elevate the current character, right? Like the idea that Peter Parker 3 or 1, he's 1. Sorry. So there's a joke. If you watch with subtitles, they number the Peter Parkers, and so it's consistently
causes problems.
Yeah. So and so the idea that Peter Parker 1, like, he facing this challenge says, hey, maybe we should do better. Maybe me, the hero, and us, the hero, once he sees the other...
We're talking about Tom Holland.
Yeah, once he sees the other Peters, he says, like, we should do better, right? We should fix these people, because, quite frankly, one of the things about the Spider-Man series of movies, I don't know if this is true universally of all his villains, but, like, they're all people that, like, man, they had a bad day and turned into a villain, right? Like,
right.
Like, literally, like with Doc Ock, they're like, actually, your stupid Techo thing, the chip fucked up and he became a bad guy. Oh, just fix the chip. Or like, poor Green Goblin, like, man, you had a moment of hubris where you jumped into your gas machine without considering the consequences, and now you're a fucking villain. Or, Electro, you fell into a pit of electric eels, and now you're a villain. Oof.
They have fun with that origin throughout the movie. That's the only, like, that's actually the main kind of issue I had. I had forgotten, of course, like, the exact cinematic origins of the Green Goblin. There was a green mist, apparently, for the Green Goblin that he stepped into.
Yeah, he uses his magic gas. His Goblin Terrigen Mist. No,
he broke out of a rock.
It's his, like, it's his, whatever he's trying to sell the DOD. So he tries, like, proof of concept on himself.
But either way, like, what they're exhibiting, and I forgot about the sort of the robot chip that broke Doc Ock's brain. What, like, the majority of these heroes are exhibiting are, like, just mental illness. And there was kind of something kind of weird that's like, Peter Parker's like, I can fix it with technology. Let me plug this thing into the back of your head, right? And let me inject you with this goo. I'll fix your brain. Like, oh, that's kind of weird, but I'll roll with it because superheroes and comics.
But it really was, because all of these characters, like, yes, they had their own, like, problem. And yes, it's all symbolic of mental illness, but really it was like, except you had that one bad thing that happened where technology wrecked you,
Yeah.
So, which is why, like, I think, as you said earlier, this movie used this multiversal hoo-ha to give the current character a chance to, like, say, this is why this character is who he is and why he's different than, maybe other superheroes. Like, he's like, hey, I'm looking at these people who are ostensibly my villains from another mother or universe.
Yep, that's the phrase. Indeed.
Right? He's like, I don't think we should just fight them. We should help them. You know?
It's interesting. Yeah, all the imported villains and heroes, whether they're hero or villain, are all foils to Tom Holland's Peter Parker. They're all going to the literary aspect of it. Like, they're all different angles, perhaps even futures, in a sense of what this character has gone through and what he could become, especially during the events of this movie and kind of the challenges he faces. He's faced with. And you brought up something really interesting that I found probably the most interesting part of this movie, which is honestly, it's not this movie. It's the end of the previous Spider-Man film where Peter Parker is outed to the world as being Spider-Man. And that's really interesting in the context of the MCU. Let me do a quick think through. But is he the only MCU hero who has a secret identity?
Well, now in the greater universe.
Well, Earth-based hero,
well,
I should
like,
say.
now in the greater universe, I think, because, like, technically Moon Knight has multiple secret identities.
That's complicated.
But also, like, I think I mean, of definitely the big movie ones, he's the only one where there is a secret identity. Yeah, because right, everyone knows who Steve Rogers is. Everyone knows who
Iron Man is,
and Falcon and
Black Widow. It seems.
Yeah, I mean, actually,
people aren't hunting for. Yeah,
you're right. She's probably Hawkeye.
Well, as Ronan.
Do they know he's Clint Barton? I guess they do. They should know about his family. Okay.
Right. And he did come the closest when he took on the Ronin persona as well.
But yes, Spider-Man that's actually a fair point.
Yeah. Which is interesting because I think for the general public, like that's kind of the superhero... Part of the superhero definition is like, you put on glasses and no one knows who you are. Or like you have an alliterative name to, that no one knows because you use your superhero name when you're out being superheroes. And that's something I've always thought that it was interesting about the MCU is that they, especially honestly with Iron Man 1, they got rid of that notion and changed the definition in a sense, or changed the expectation and for what superheroes are cinematically going forward, because especially for Superman and Batman, secret identities are
essential,
integral to their stories working at all. And so this is the first sort of MCU story where we've had a character directly dealing with people know who I am, and that's bad. And I'm glad it's only happened this time because it nearly broke reality. Trying to fix it.
Well, and it helps it makes it make more sense that he's like a high school kid.
Sure.
Who was dragged into this by, Tony Stark.
Right.
But yeah, I think, so I would say that I think as overall as a film, I really, they brought back all the classics and sometimes the not classics and made them better. Like, I think, everyone talks about Jamie Foxx where he's like, yeah, I'll do this, but you got to fix fix that character. Right. And to the point where like, they give him an MCU version that makes sense to the character, right? But also like he doesn't look like a weird shitty special effect.
Right.
And they give him a reason to be more villainous, where he's like, no, I like it here. I like what I've done. Yeah. I don't want to be fixed like the rest of these guys.
Thomas Hayden Church got a good 30 minutes of work.
I was actually shocked. The one that shocked me was with the lizard when he finally like demorphs. It's like, oh, you brought him back,
right? I can't. This is gonna sound real bad. I bet I haven't done any research, but I might have heard this that with the Thomas Hayden Church sort of depowering, they reused footage from Spider-Man 3 because one, he looks. I mean, he wasn't young when he made Spider-Man 3, but he doesn't look as old. I mean, he doesn't look, 10 years older.
I mean, they have the Marvel Wayback Machine.
It reminded me of how they... Oh, God, this is going to sound real bad. Of how they used footage of Brandon Lee to finish The Crow. Where, I was like, here's some footage, from an outtake, and we're going to put this in the mirror, because we have a guy in front of the mirror that's just a body double, but since he's dead now... We're going to have him walk in front of the mirror and superimpose on the mirror this footage of Brandon Lee that we had here. It just felt like they kind of took some footage and erased all the surrounding background stuff. And we have Thomas Hayden Church now, even though he probably never stepped foot into a studio. And I don't know if they did. Did they really bring, what's his name? Rhys Ifans? Is that the guy that did the lizard? That might be a different British guy.
Oh, they're all. I believe they're all credited officially.
They're all credited. Yeah, I just wonder if they brought them in. Or...
Well, and this is there's a whole different story about the Marvel in the Disney Wayback Machine, right? Especially as they've been abusing it in Star Wars. But I do think that these actors showed up for something.
I don't know, because the Sandman stuff, there's no interaction while he's depowered with any other characters. It's just him looking at his hand.
Well, it could be. He may have just voiced it, right?
I think that at least. I think at least that.
That's honestly, with a character like that, that's really mostly what he did for the first one anyway. Right. Right. So, but I want to make it clear that he does. I believe the actor was involved with it.
Sure. Yes. I wasn't.
Ifans. That's the thing. Is like he probably only, if he showed up at all, only showed up to have that one scene where he's lying in, like naked and like, all right, cut.
And I actually don't mean to discount maybe those two actors, Thomas Hayden Church and Rhys Ifans. Maybe they did like motion capture for the characters as well. I don't know, but I didn't mean to. Yeah.
But it's definitely like
it's cool to see them kind of not cutting corners, but like doing their best to make it all fit.
Yeah.
And probably within a budget, because that's a lot of actors to bring in. Not that they're all super huge, famous actors, but I'm sure some of these actors cost a lot of money. But who are the standout returning actors to you? We don't have to go through all of them, but who are the ones that really stood out the most to you?
So I will. I thought Andrew Garfield was solid. Really,
they gave him a lot to do. To do.
Alfred Molina, I've always liked his Doc Ock, and I thought like having him come back and be the first one that's like, I'm on board with this,
Yeah.
And hands down, Willem Dafoe. You know what?
Yeah.
That guy, like, because I always think back to the idea that when he found out they were making a Spider-Man movie, he recorded his own like fucked up audition tape. Because he's Willem Dafoe. And the idea that here he is, like, I'm coming back and I'm going to lean into this and be probably one of the most prominent characters of this rogues gallery, right? To have the most screen time, to have the most involvement, and also to just lean into the fact that we're going to cast off your old Sam Raimi costume.
Oops.
And just, like, I like that, like, that's always the joke. Like, hey, you wear a hood now. Oh, you mean like this old Spider-Man art I could find, right?
right.
Which I thought was good, and he clearly, I'm assuming he enjoyed it because he always seemed
to, yeah. I think they give both Molina and Dafoe a lot to do. I feel like Molina was kind of front loaded, but
and I would say that Dafoe was more backloaded, but middle to back. Yeah,
I think they were able to they use whether they wrote it this way or once they kind of had them back in the studio or back on set, like they realized, oh shit, these guys are like really good actors, because they both sold beautifully, not in a hackneyed way where they needed to be buffeted with like musical cues or anything like that, of going back and forth from being quote unquote evil to being quote unquote good. You could see it in their faces. You could hear it in their voices. You could hear it in their interactions and see it in their interactions with the other characters. It was like they carried the emotional weight of this movie, even more than sort of the more intentional heartstring pulled moments like character deaths and whatnot. In contrast, I would say Tobey Maguire showed up.
He showed up. No, it honestly, like, and I do appreciate that they have him as like I'm getting too old for this shit. And
I didn't mean to.
No, it's fine. And they had the funny moment of acknowledging that, like, wait, you this is.
That came out of you. I think it's what the character said. I watched that little scene like 4 times last night while watching this. I'm like, that is so beautiful.
The other
that
two
came out of you.
Flabbergasted, like, wait, it comes out of you?
So good. No, it's interesting. His Peter Parker is in a very different place than the Peter Parker we last saw him as, right? Much older. The sort of boyish kind of pubescent kind of voice cracking is long gone. He was a different guy. Like it was really interesting to watch him.
I mean, he was almost to the point where had they told me he was like I've had a rough life and like,
right.
Like I would have believed it because that's kind of how it felt. Like, oh, like everyone's dead and shit sucks and like, but they didn't do that quite. But like it was still, I was much more accepting of it than I expected I would be.
Yeah. And I think you pointed out a really interesting thing. Is like, yes, these are all characters from their own series, and there is fan nods there. But I think the masterful thing that they did with this movie is kind of boil each Spider-Man down to each of these 2 extra Spider-Man, down to the essence of what those characters need to be for Tom Holland Parker.
Right.
Which is Maguire is kind of like, I'm getting too old for this shit, like you said. And he's lost a lot, but he's made some things work. Andrew Garfield, even though he doesn't really show it, is kind of embodiment of anger and rage and regret, right? And that's perfectly encapsulated in the scene when even though I haven't seen The Amazing Spider-Man, right? I haven't seen those movies at all. When he rescues Zendaya, our MJ, for lack of a better word, like that choked me up, because he's like, I did it.
Right,
I saved her.
His whole shtick is he tried that before and it fucked up.
Yeah. It's beautiful, absolutely gorgeous moment, and Garfield sold it. So that, again, going back to what I was saying before, what that does, it's not being reductive. I guess it technically is being reductive, but it is making them reductive in the sense that they serve purposes for the MCU Peter Parker, and they have a specific job they need to get done, while also being charming and action packed and stuff like that. It was really deftly written and acted and made. I was really impressed with, especially the use of the Peters Parker.
It is somebody who watches a lot of dumb stuff with multiversal crossovers. I think about like the Power Rangers do this, or I mean, Star Trek doesn't do it quite like this, but this was definitely I thought a good execution of, it's not just a cameo, right? We didn't just fly through all these characters for fun. We made them part of the story that we told in a way that felt like, okay, your main character had some advancement because of what happens.
Right. It wasn't just a romp, although it was a romp.
It was a romp, but it wasn't just a romp, which is what I think these kind of big crossover, shit things can be like. It's just a romp, okay.
Yeah,
and especially one here where it's like, do you care about these old Spider-Mans? Like, if not, that was a risk, right? And I think if you don't have investment in the old Spider-Mans, you could still watch it and get what these characters that show up do to it, contribute to it. Like you said, with it, you didn't see Amazing Spider-Mans, but you know that when he saves MJ, that's relevant because in his world he didn't save the girl,
And they made that clear, right? And they showed through his actions in the other scenes that he was in, the remorse, the anger, the regret, right?
Right.
But
and I'm going to say, I think Andrew Garfield's probably right now of the three the best actor. Although Tom Holland has time to grow. Tobey Maguire is past that, but that's okay. It's okay.
I mean, he's probably our age. Fucking calm down, bro.
Why no? I'm just saying,
he's past being a superhero at this point.
Wow. Sure. So I mean, he's had a lot of time to, I'm just saying he doesn't do as much anymore, right? I think he's kind of oh, okay, maybe I'm not acting anymore.
Oh, sure. But he's still active. He's doing producing and writing and shit like that, I'm sure. But I'm not here to defend fucking Tobey Maguire, but he's my Spider-Man. Okay, no. But you bring up an interesting point that I think we should actually spend some time on. That the idea of multiverses is kind of like the new plaything for nerd cinema or nerd fiction, I guess. It's not that it's new and hasn't been done before, but it's definitely in vogue, right? We have Multiverse of Madness. We have the indie film. Was it Everything Everywhere All at Once?
Right, which I hear is a multiverse excellent, movie.
But I heard it's great. Yeah, it looks awesome.
At its core, this multiversal film.
Yes. And
Michelle Yeoh's Multiverse of Madness.
honestly, she even has the third eye by sticking that little googly eye on her forehead. It looks great.
I so wish I've seen that movie, but
multiverses are in vogue, and I think it's important to talk about because I think both you and I maybe have different approaches to it. Like I said, I've been mostly skeptical about it because it feels like a gimmick. It feels like you're writing off just good storytelling in a lot of ways because you're just doing fan service. But I also have other hesitations. I think you might be more open to it, maybe because of your Star Trek history. I don't know. They seem to dabble.
I mean, Star Trek really, there's the Mirror Universe and now more recently the Picard Universe or whatever.
And the Kelvin Universe.
Okay. And so it is, the multiverse as a concept is, is so full disclosure, as we're discussing this, I follow a lot of RPG stuff, and for those who don't know, this month a new the Dragons came out that it may as well be called D&D in the Multiverse of Madness. I believe it's called Mordenkainen's Multiverse or something of monsters, right? But it's acknowledging, D&D as a game is leaning into the multiverse. Not that it didn't have multiverse concepts before, because they had literally multiple universes of settings for the game. But now they're really saying like, oh, but they're all they're connected. You can cross over and whatever. Right. So I think multiverses. You're right. There are. It's a concept that's more popular, and I think for me, it's always the fun thing of it's what the original 1968 Star Trek episode Mirror Mirror said. Like, what if your characters but different? In this case, bad, right?
Right.
But that's kind of like, it's also what the was it the Marvel did What If, and DC did Elseworlds, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is always were some really interesting ideas, right? What if these characters, but something different? Now I joke because What If had some really like kind of dumb ones,
right.
Like what if Rick James? Is it Rick James?
Rick James, bitch.
No, who's the guy that works with the Hulk in the 60s and 70s?
Rick.
Is it Rick James?
It's Rick.
Sorry, someone did an alt cover. Where
he's a super freak. What can I say?
Someone did the alt cover where it's what if Rick James became the Hulk? But I think it's whatever
it's
his
Rick
friend is.
something.
Rick something.
Rick Jones.
Rick Jones. Someone did the what if Rick James became the Hulk?
What if Rick James became Hulk's sidekick?
But it's so like that. Or what if the Fantastic Four had each other's powers? And like,
right.
Okay. So
right. What if for X-Men the first big one they did was what if Dark Phoenix won, right? That kind of stuff.
So it's. But I think there are ones where it's interesting. Like we've talked about years ago, the Elseworlds Red Sun, which I've always loved, is this idea of, what if Superman is
missed,
was 12 hours out and landed in Ukraine,
right?
During,
I'm like, let's say the more interesting. What if Superman was fucking 7 hours out and landed at the bottom of the Atlantic?
Well, because in that got picked up by Atlanteans, like.
Oh, gee, I wasn't going there. I was just saying he's cocooned up down there.
But so that becomes that thing where you have these like, oh, that's a cool idea. Once you have the character and you understand it, you can start to play with the multiverse. And really, what I think the Spider-Man movie set does is that the public these movies have been out for 20 years. They're out there. We can now do that. Like we have like the amount of Spider-Mans of different stories where we could do that. And I think actually DC gets to that. I think that they did that with for at least from my perspective when DCCW did their bullshit crossover.
Crisis. Yeah.
They did, like they brought in Burt Ward as they brought in I forget
Brandon Routh. Brandon Routh was always there,
but as Superman, right?
Right.
They brought.
It's interesting. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
They also brought in Tom. What's his name? Helling.
Tom Welling.
They brought him in too, right? They brought in all these people to say like, hey, there's been enough DC TV shows and movies that we can like do this, and it has some, meaning, some content. Like,
right.
I actually think there's I think it's an interesting concept. It's not always universally appropriate, but I like it.
It's interesting because I think superhero cinema, both TV and film, I'm just going to call them all cinema, has been around long enough. Like you said, it really kicked off in 2000, 2001 with, X-Men and I guess you could say 89 with Batman, but in the 70s with Superman, but you know what I'm saying. Modern superhero cinema.
Batman.
The modern superhero cinema kicked off with, X-Men, Spider-Man, and the like. But since then, I think the producers and writers have found a way to slap back with the biggest criticism that general that the general public has had about superhero cinema. It's like, why are they always rebooting these movies every 5 years? Do we need another Spider-Man origin story? Do we need another Batman? Do we need to see Batman's parents die again? And it's like, well, now, bro, we're going to bring them all together, and you're going to love it, right? It's like they kind of found, not a way out of that complaint, but a way to at least moot that complaint a bit so that, like, oh, look, it's all still viable. It's all still useful. Like, we have Michael Keaton coming back,
right,
as Batman, right,
in Supergirl.
Sure, yeah, and or is the Flash, and the Flash? Well,
oof.
He's showing up in the Flash too.
Yeah,
he's showing up in the Flash.
Someone's showing up in the Flash.
Right,
I don't think Ezra Miller is.
But I mean, I'm sure that shit's already shot by this point. But yeah, so like it's just because it's been rebooted, I guess is what I'm saying. It's like it's teaching the public that just because something's been rebooted or recast, that doesn't mean necessarily that that those previous iterations are gone, especially if you liked them. Hell, not to like dive it too far into this or go too far ahead. Like there's like news coming out about the 60th Doctor Who anniversary special, and like, you know, old doctors never die.
Right.
they just they just
get older and fatter.
They're just on call. Yeah.
But
so
like,
it's
I
interesting.
Think that is, you know, there is I think a place for that. I think what the comic books discovered in the 70s was that, you know, even in comic book, people like the idea of like bringing stuff back or whatever,
right.
You know.
Right. And I think that's important to say, not to cut in real quick, but like you mentioned What If and Elseworlds, DC and Marvel had been playing with the multiverse stuff long before that. DC mostly as a way to reboot or to codify kind of the discrepancies and like why was Superman different in the 50s, you know, versus how he is now. And Marvel just to kind of play, because Marvel, I don't think has done
I think they did a couple years ago. Like
systems-wide reboot.
Right, with Secret War Invasion.
Yeah. I don't
read the books.
I don't know if everything... Yeah, but whatever. But so they've played with it outside of those isolated sort of centralized situations like Elseworlds and What If. Like it's actually played into the main storylines of the Uber story, right? For each company.
And I think that what I will say to kind of bring it back around is that this is always a challenge. And I'm actually going to go back to and critique DCCW. You know, when they did The Flash, you know, by season 2, they basically started to do multiverse stuff. And some of that shit was, I liked it, but I feel like it started to get really like, you know, like, okay, maybe let's not do this as much. You know, where the whole thing was like, oh, look, we have the other Flash from another universe, which if you're a DC Comics fan, you know, like, oh, Jay Garrick, that's the whatever. And then, of course, they also tied it in, too, where they had the actor who played the Flash in the 90s
yeah.
come back.
Because he was already a character on the Flash.
He was already a character on the Flash, but he came back and played Jay Garrick at the end of
Brandon
season 2.
Routh, right?
Before Brandon Routh played it, yeah. So it's that thing where it can feel like it can, to me, it's there's always a gamble to it. And I think like there's a way to do it wrong where it's like a masturbatory fan service, you know.
Yes.
But then I also think of what, like, not quite the same but similar, X-Men: Days of Future Past, which I thought like did that kind of thing of it's not a multiverse, but it was a, you know, fan servicey time travel, and I thought it was like that again. That was really solid because you brought back the old X-Men, but tied it to the new X-Men in a really solid way that like felt like, yeah, this is great.
Right.
So yeah.
You touch on something that actually makes me most skeptical of multiverse stories is, at least with the MCU or any sort of like cinematic universe they're building, it's like, especially, well, let's talk about the MCU, because the sort of pattern they've created is like we have individual movies that culminate in this event film, which the Avengers films, it brings it all together and we fight this huge threat, right? I feel like when you get to like breaking and fixing the multiverse. That's kind of, if you're trying to elevate the threat level with each successive event film, like the multiverse is kind of the ceiling. Like you're breaking all of reality, all realities. Like, what's the next threat going to be? I don't know. Like that seems like, well, yeah, that's threatening this reality, this universe. Multiverses, you're threatening every existence everywhere. Like, you can't, like, what do you do after that? Like, well, there's a mob boss that moved into town. Right. We should probably deal with him.
What did they do after Galactus? You know, like, I don't know. Did they stop Marvel Comics? Like,
Galactus wasn't multiverse though. He's just a big dude that likes to eat planets, bro.
I thought he was an intergalactic planet eater, or
intergalactic,
interdimensional.
I don't think so. We are not the right people to talk about this.
Don't tell
I'm not.
But like, right. But I mean, that was like, to me, that was I thought that's like, yeah, they did that, and how did they resolve it? I know you always 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, but
right. Well, I guess the answer is kind of what they're doing now with well, maybe not right now, but like with a lot of Marvel properties, it's like, well, okay, we're gonna put like the big stuff on the back burner and focus on small character stuff. We're gonna do Moon Knight. We're gonna do Ms. Marvel. Right. That'll build up to the Marvels. That will, we'll also have Wakanda Forever. Is that the next Black Panther movie that's coming out?
Right. Yeah. But I think you're right. Like that is a challenge, and I think actually, to me, so this is actually where I think of now. I fall back on my Star Trek, where you spent all this time building up to a big universe, and now it's built, and now you know what? Put Moon Knight out there, where like there is no real connection, but it's in the same place. So if you have a reference like, something Tony Stark, like we know what that means, that's fun. And if you don't know what it means, you don't miss much.
Right.
And granted you have things like Loki where like it literally is, going in that direction, but of, big multiverse stuff. But I do think that this is where you get to have, and I say like Star Trek, where you have, this show, and this show that are not directly connected, but they live in the same world such that when one does something, the other can reference it.
Right.
I mean, I always think of like the Netflix Marvel shows where they all referenced the Battle for New York and then stopped.
Right.
Right. Like stopped referencing anything after that because that's when the license ended, or whatever.
Which leads me to probably one of my favorite and most surprising parts of going back to the original discussion here. Spider-Man No Way Home. I knew that Matt Murdock was in this. I didn't know how much they leaned into like, oh no, yeah, this is fucking Daredevil, bro. Like someone throws a brick through a window and he catches it. I'm like, oh, okay. I thought it was just gonna be, hey, yeah, it's the same actor. They're gonna call him Matt and he's got red glasses on and like but no, he's a superhero.
Well, like, I think I joked with you and friend of the show Taylor that I fully expect that he's gonna be in a bunch of stuff, but only as Matt Murdock, the attorney.
Right.
And we're never going to see Daredevil again, except it's always going to be like, oh, but we know he's Daredevil.
Yeah, right. Or just oblique references to the devil of Hell's Kitchen.
Right, but never see the costume again, never see the character again, just him catching bricks and doing law stuff.
Catching bricks. Yeah. That's the goal that we all should aim for. So if you, dear listeners, have any thoughts about the topics you discussed this week, feel free to leave your thoughts as comments on the page of this episode at forallintents.net. I don't know why I said it like that.
You can also post your comments or engage in conversations with other listeners on our Facebook page.
You can find us on other social media as well, such as Twitter and Instagram, where you can find us at respective handles. On Twitter, you can find Andrew at Profound Dark, tweeting about tabletop role-playing games. And you can find me at dbethel. You can also find us on Instagram, where you can find Andrew at Profound Brick and me and my work at dbethel Comics.
While you're at our website at forallintents.net, you can also take a look at our YouTube page where you'll find the show.
You might even be listening to us now.
If you're listening to us on YouTube, like they say, like and subscribe.
Smash that subscribe button. That's what the kids say.
Mm-hmm.
I read an article about it on the New York Times.
Oh,
boy. We use two tracks of music for our show. One is called Disco Medusae. The other is called District 4. And they're both written and performed by Kevin McLeod of the Clan McLeod, immortal swordsman, graph paper enthusiast, and musician extraordinaire. Hopefully he hasn't pursued those NFTs.
You can find his music at incompetech.filmmusic.io, and that's all licensed under the Creative Commons 4.0 attribution license.
If you like the show and like to help us out, the best way to do so would be to subscribe to the show using whichever podcasting service you happen to use. What would help us out even more, though, would be to go to the storefront and leaving some sort of review, whether a text review or using the proprietary metric will help spread the word to new potential listeners through the magic of algorithms. We got a trailer for She-Hulk.
Yes, we did.
People are mad, of course, because one, it's a lady, two, because they're snobs. But you know what? It looks fucking great.
Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, I want to see more. Like, I didn't see enough Boston Legal in that trailer.
I mean, but I saw more than I was expecting.
Sure. Yes, that's why. Like, I'm hopeful. And it'll be fun. It'll be fun either way.
It'd be great if we saw in the credits for the first episode, creative consultant David E. Kelly.
But
we're not.
We're not.
We're not.
Although this is why, like, speaking of Matt Murdock, I do just like I kind of like the idea that they would have, her in court and just have all the other lawyers that we know, right? Yeah. Like have Charlie Cox and the other folks from Daredevil and Jessica Jones, just as like just as them as attorneys or whatever doing that thing. And then
I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, they're totally going to do that. They have to.
I hope so. They
have to.
I don't know if they will, but I just like, and even like, whatever counsel, counsel for the defense, Matt Murdock, counsel for whatever, like the problem is that like I don't know what kind of law she's going to be practicing.
They insinuate in the trailer that like what this government is opening up like a superhero law firm or something.
So maybe
like
she will be, counsel for the defense, Matt Murdock.
It seems cool. I'm excited. People are complaining about the CG. My take on that is like they're showing us probably unfinished CG just because it doesn't debut till August, and people are always complaining about not having trailers yet. So they release a trailer. What they need to do is like what they show on like video game commercials or toy commercials, going like this is unreleased game footage or something.
And I get that stuff is hard, right? Like because it's not like they're not doing a full replace, right? They're just doing her, but colored green and whatever.
Well, they're making her taller and stuff like that.
Yeah. And also like, and I don't care. Like, man, I watched the CW shows.
It's superheroes. It's not real. It's supposed to be dumb and fun and cool.
I've seen bad. I watched the original series of Star Trek. Like the only special effect in that show was Bill Shatner's girdle.
Set your whining to stun.
So, I'm excited. Want to see it.
So until you have something to be excited about, dear listeners, and hope there's plenty out there for you to do so. I'm D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Raspberry.
And for all intents and purposes,
that was a podcast. Instead of doing header tags, you just do pound signs before the headings, based on whether it's heading 1 through 6.
Oh man, it reminds me of my college days. I used to do pound signs before the headings, if you know what I'm saying.
It's funny for me because I stopped using pages, right?
Oh, I don't know if I ever did use it.
I did when I wasn't producing documents for anyone to use. Like,
right. So what do you use? Why are you being cagey about it?
Oh, it's called Highland. Highland 2.
Can you buy? Well, is it a freeware program or do you
no?
have to purchase
I bought it.
Oh, can you buy multiple licenses or can you only buy one?
No, it's an Apple thing, or it's not. It's I think only on Mac.
So there can be only one on your computer at a time.
Yes. Well, except it's Highland 2.
Oh, so it's a bad one.
Yeah, it's not the best. In fact, every now and then
they brought back features that had no reason, like they clearly died in the last one. Had to take my dog to the bank, so you had to make a deposit.
No, I understand. He had to make a deposit, obviously, right? I worry about what the interest rate on that deposit's going to be.
What do you use?
Something that lets me write Markdown.
Markdown. Markdown's my favorite G.I. Joe.
Tranquil as a bowel movement. No, that's not right.